Als nächster Punkt der Tagesordnung.
The next item on the agenda is a statement from the Commission and Council on the situation in Poland. Colleagues, could I refer you to the fact that in this particular debate there will be no catch-the-eye procedure, nor will there be any blue cards permitted.
Sehr geehrte, wir lassen jetzt hier keine Geschäftsordnungsdebatte zu.
Colleagues, we are now going to begin the debate. We're not going to get engaged in a debate on points of order. This is what was agreed in the Bureau. It has been communicated to the groups. You should all have been informed of this. I'd like to welcome Szydło very warmly to the Parliament. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been decided that there will be a debate on the decision of the Commission to introduce a dialogue on the question of the rule of law and strengthening it in Poland. This is the first time a debate such as this has taken place in this Parliament. This is, moreover, a new instrument. There has never been such a debate. This instrument did not exist until March 2014 and has not been invoked previously. It's an early warning system so that if we wish to debate on the division of powers, on rule of law and so forth, which are integral and fundamental pillars of our European Union, then we have an opportunity to do so. It is therefore a central debate for the future development of the European Union. We're going to work in a very focused manner and on the basis of complete and total mutual respect, I am sure. Once again, I would reiterate my welcome to Ms. Szydło, Prime Minister of Poland, and my thanks to her for being ready to participate in this debate. We shall now move on to the debate itself. It is my pleasure to give the floor to the Foreign Minister of the Netherlands, Mr. Koenders, on behalf of the Council.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. The European Union is not only a coin or a market, it is also a union built on common values. The EU treaties are eloquent and crystal clear. Article 2 states the values on which this union is founded and reaffirms that these values are common to all member states. Membership in our union does not only entail benefits but also responsibilities. Among the foremost responsibilities of each member state is the respect for the Union's fundamental values, and notably the rule of law, democracy and fundamental rights. It is what makes us as member states, but also as Union, unique in the world. These values are shared not only because they are written on paper, but because they have been brought to life in our pluralistic and open societies over the last decades, sometimes against stiff opposition. They are fundamental because they ensure essential guarantees for the freedom of our citizens and the functioning of our democracies. However, neither the rule of law nor other fundamental values can be taken for granted. This continent brought forth the three most deadly and venomous political doctrines we know. Our ancestors have fought over these doctrines and finally overcame them. We have learned our lessons the hard way. And we have vowed countless times that we would never return to those dark days, that we would build a new community on this continent where freedom and peace would reign. We have been successful in this endeavour, and the secret to that success is that we put democracy and the rule of law first. Then and today, it remains crucial that we continue to do so. Ensuring the respect is a constant challenge to which governments must live up. And yet, we must be honest. No one country has the monopoly on virtue, and no one country has the monopoly on vice. We all have deficiencies, but the true strength of our democracies is that we can identify these deficiencies, debate them, acknowledge them, and fix them. That is what democracy is all about. This also implies that we are ready to have open discussions about the best way to protect these values in times of change. Today's debate, in which the Council, and I thank you for that, has been invited to intervene, was triggered by the most recent measures introduced by the newly democratically elected Polish government. These measures, notably the position of the Constitutional Tribunal and the governance of public media. Both the independence of tribunals and the freedom and pluralism of our media are indispensable elements of ensuring the rule of law in a democratic society. The Council has repeatedly stressed that media freedom and pluralism are fundamental values and essential pillars of democracy. This is due to their important role in ensuring transparency, their impact on the public opinion and on the participation of citizens in the decision-making processes. On several occasions, the Council has also highlighted the independence of the judiciary as a core value emerging from the constitutional traditions of Member States. It is not for the Presidency to pass judgment, especially not at this juncture in time. The Council has not discussed this situation. But I do want to briefly say something about Poland. Not many countries have suffered from European history as Poland has. Divided, occupied, purged and ravaged. But the Polish spirit has never died. It has fought for its independence and its identity, even under the Soviet yoke. And while its government was in exile, Polish soldiers helped liberate my country in 1945. And for that, I will be eternally grateful. And now, in 2016, 11 years after Poland joined the European Union, it has thrust itself forward into the circle of big powers. It has succeeded in establishing itself as a confident and successful European political and economic power, and it has grown into a democratic state with strengthened institutions. And the Polish people have been able to do this because they could build upon a tradition as having had one of the most earliest and enlightened constitutions in Europe, as its constitution of 1791 attests to. The Polish people deserve huge respect for what they have accomplished, and in their quest for sovereignty, they have found themselves in the heart of the European Union. The Presidency is grateful for being given the opportunity to participate in this debate. The Parliament has always shown great dedication to the protection of rule of law, democracy and fundamental rights in the Union. It is no secret that my country, the Netherlands, home to grotius and host to many international tribunals, feels it must embed fundamental rights and the rule of law in its foreign and European policies. In 2013, together with Germany, Finland and Denmark, we sent a letter to our partners arguing the need for a platform to debate the rule of law. If we can talk about fish and finance, why not also talk about fundamental rights and the rule of law? That is also why we are organising a rule of law seminar on migration in Strasbourg on the 2nd of February. We hope to have many participants from the relevant institutions. Only 2 months ago, the Council held its first annual dialogue on the rule of law in the Union. We will organise the second rule of law dialogue in the GAG of May. We will use the outcome of the February seminar as a basis for this discussion. Our Presidency is thus committed to ensuring respect for these core values. Of course, the Council is not acting alone in these matters of fundamental importance. On the contrary, the Commission plays, in our view, a vital role in monitoring developments in this field across the Union, especially in their role as guardian of the treaties. I also wish to highlight the role played by the Council of Europe and its Venice Commission in these questions. Both the European Commission and the Venice Commission, in accordance with their roles, are looking into the developments under discussion today, and we should suggest that this debate is carried out in an impartial and cooperative spirit, and that progress can be made after a thorough analysis of the facts. The Vice President of the Commission will update us on the work of the Commission and the next steps after the College's decision last week to launch a structured dialogue with the Polish authorities. And Prime Minister Szydło, and I had the honour to talk with her today, will have the opportunity to address this chamber and share her government's position. I welcome her participation today, which can only contribute to the necessary dialogue within our European democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Before I give the floor to the Vice President of the Commission, colleagues, I'd like to welcome all the many guests we have up in the gallery. There are a lot of people who've made a long journey to be here today, But today we are not able to have any applause or any commentary from the gallery at all, and therefore I would ask you to be neutral and silent. Mr. Timmermans now.
Madam Prime Minister, Mr. Minister, honourable members of the European Parliament. On behalf of President Juncker and my colleagues in the Commission, I want to set out to you the reasons why the Commission has decided to assess the recent developments in Poland and how we hope to move forward in a constructive and facts-based dialogue with Poland to prevent the emergence of a systemic threat to the rule of law. The main reason for beginning this assessment under the 2014 rule of law framework is a situation concerning the Polish Constitutional Tribunal, and in particular the dispute about the nomination of a number of judges of the tribunal. In principle, this should be an issue for the Constitutional Tribunal itself to resolve. However, as things stand, the other institutions of the Polish state have not complied with the judgments rendered by the Constitutional Tribunal on the matter. This has given rise to uncertainty regarding the functioning of the Constitutional Tribunal. Furthermore, the Polish Parliament has decided to shorten the mandates of the President and the Vice President of the Tribunal. On the 28th of December last year, an amendment to the law on the Constitutional Tribunal entered into force, which appears to render the functioning of the Constitutional Tribunal considerably more difficult. Given the central position of the Tribunal within the Polish judicial system, we risk seeing the emergence of a systemic threat to the rule of law. Concerns have also been raised as regards the new media law. The rule of law, as defined in our rule of law framework, requires the respect for democracy and fundamental rights. Media freedom and pluralism are also closely connected with fundamental rights, in particular the freedom of expression. This is why the Commission considers it necessary to assess this law in the light of the rule of law. The European Union is founded on a common set of values enshrined in Article 2 of the Treaty on the European Union, which include in particular the respect for the rule of law. Mutual trust among EU member states and their respective legal systems depends on the confidence that the rule of law is observed in all member states. When national rule of law safeguards seem to come under threat, the EU needs to act. I would also note that the Constitutional Tribunal in Poland has a key role to play in ensuring that the legislative reforms currently envisaged in Poland comply with the Constitution. For this reason as well, it is essential to resolve the present dispute concerning the Constitutional Tribunal as a matter of urgency, so that the Tribunal can fully play its role as a national rule of law mechanism. I wrote to Poland twice on these matters on the 23rd and 30th of December last year. However, the replies we received then were not complete and not sufficient to dispel our concerns. The rule of law framework allows us to assess the matter in a structured manner together with the Polish authorities. We should make use of the rule of law framework in an open and constructive manner, in a spirit of cooperation, not of confrontation. And we've just received, I think an hour or so ago, another letter in answer to the letter I sent last week, and we will assess that, indeed, in a constructive and cooperative manner to see what the answers are to the questions we sent last week. Obviously, I can't go into that already now. We need to assess it carefully. We've just received the letter, I think, an hour ago. I would like to stress firstly that we are at the beginning of the process under the framework. The framework has a preventive nature, and the start of a detailed factual and legal assessment in no way implies any automatic move to decisions at later stages. That will depend purely on the facts and answering us so quickly will help to stimulate that dialogue and to have a constructive dialogue with the Polish government. We will engage in this dialogue in an impartial, evidence-based and cooperative way. It goes without saying that the Commission fully respects the sovereignty of the Republic of Poland, and it carries out its duties in an objective and non-partisan manner, as for any other member state, in line with the duties imposed on the Commission by treaties signed and ratified by sovereign states, the members of the European Union. Finally, we will conduct our assessment in close cooperation with the Venice Commission of the Council of Europe, and I welcome that, following my suggestion, the Polish government has itself asked for an opinion of the Venice Commission on the reform of the Constitutional Tribunal. I want to repeat, this is the spirit within which we wrote to the Polish government last week. And I have a feeling that this is also the spirit within which the Polish government has responded to our letter of last week, and we will make a careful analysis of the response and then enter into a further dialogue with the Polish government to hopefully solve this issue shortly. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Vielen Dank, Herr Timmermans. Das Wort hat jetzt.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Timmermans. It is now my pleasure to give the floor to Mr. Josef, Prime Minister of Poland.
Szanowny Panie Przewodniczący.
Mr. President of the European Parliament, Minister, ladies and gentlemen, I am grateful for this opportunity to address the European Parliament on the subject of Poland. I thank you for your invitation and I look forward to a high-quality debate. This is important to me. I'd like to dispel any doubts you may have about the changes we are introducing in Poland. We are carrying out these changes in Poland following the democratic general election in Poland in October 2015. The Polish electorate has voted for change, voted for the policies of law and justice, my political party. I appreciate the opportunity to address this august assembly on behalf of the Polish government and first and foremost on behalf of the Polish people who believe in equality, freedom and sovereignty. Those are values the Polish people have been fighting for many years. Those are values we cherish above all else. Freedom, equality, justice and sovereignty are the values upon which our country is being built. I hope that in the wake of my address, you will be of the firm belief that Poland is just as much part of the united Europe as the countries that you represent. Ladies and gentlemen, honourable members, sometimes in Poland we hear voices that hurt, voices which are unfair, unjust towards Poland and the Polish government. It is possible that these voices speak out of a lack of information or possibly even bad will, but I hope those are in a minority, because we Europeans ought to be building our community on the basis of trust, respect for diversity. differentiation and the unity of the European Union. We believe in unity, we believe in security. That's why we have risen to the challenge of building a united Europe of strong states which can together face the challenges that we are all facing, that we need to discuss together in order to overcome them. The Poles want to support Europe at times of difficult decisions. The Polish people are open to supporting Europe in the face of these challenges. We are part of the united Europe. That is tremendously important to us. Some words have already been spoken about Polish history, and I'm grateful to Mr. Koenders for what he has said. Poland's history has been a troubled history. Our fathers, grandfathers gave their blood for freedom, for us to be part of a united Europe, but they also spilt blood for the freedom of other European nations. For many decades, we had to fight for the right to speak our own opinions, to fight for the right to build our own state. We achieved that, and we're not going to have it taken away. That is an ideal that the united Europe taught us to believe in, taught us to fight for. We are proud of that achievement. In the elections of last year, the people of Poland voted in favor of our manifesto, the Law and Justice Manifesto. The Law and Justice Manifesto addresses the concerns of those citizens who, after years of EU membership, after years of transformation, have found it difficult to get by from day to day. I think you may be surprised to hear that although Poland is in the European Union, many Polish children only eat hot meals at school. Many Polish pensioners spend half of their pension on medicines. Many people are unemployed. Many young people are unemployed. People face choices. Do we buy medicines or do we pay our bills? Those are the everyday difficulties of Polish people. Many Polish people who feel they have been left behind in the process of transformation. We want to build a Poland that is a mirror image of the European Union, a Poland of freedom, equality and equality of opportunity. And we want Poland to travel even faster down this path towards equality of opportunity. To achieve that, we drafted a manifesto using examples copied from successful EU countries. We believe that we need to learn from those who have been successful, those who have achieved what we seek to achieve. We know that many people in Poland want equality of opportunity, and our manifesto is designed to deliver that. We are now in government as a result of those elections. The decision of the Polish people has inspired us to carry through the changes that we promised on the hustings. That is our compact with the Polish people. And although the government is relatively young still, we are already at work. We are already working on those decisions, on those measures that will develop Poland further in line with the law, in full respect of the Constitution, and indeed in compliance with the European Union treaties. Let me say again We are part of the European Union. We have been, we are, and we shall continue to be members of the European Union, part of this Europe of equality of opportunity. We hope that Europe will show respect to all Europeans. We hope that the EU will look after all its component member states, and we want to be active members of such a European Union. For centuries, Poland has believed in the rule of law. Yes, indeed, Poland was the first European country to have a constitution. For Poles, the constitution is sacrosanct. And, honourable members, the constitution, the Polish constitution, has not in recent times been breached. Although I do welcome this opportunity to address you and to represent the Polish government, I must say that I don't see the need to devote so much time to Poland. I think that you, honourable members, have many important issues to discuss. I think there are many problems that Europe has at the moment that we need to grapple with. But I am here because I want to engage in this dialogue. I'd like to talk to you about Poland. I'd like to dispel any doubts you may have. And I think that with the goodwill that there is between us, we can all leave the chamber after this debate believing that Poland is a strong country, a member state of the European Union that is developing on a positive trajectory, and we can be proud of that. I understand there are two areas of doubt, one concerning the Constitutional Court and the other concerning the media law. The Constitutional Court, honourable members, in Poland is a very strong institution. It is functioning well. It has pronounced a judgment even today. It is continuing its work. The changes that we carried out, the changes to the law on the Constitutional Court, reflect EU standards and in no way differ from the standards in other EU member states. We did have to change the law on the Constitutional Court because in June 2015 the outgoing parliament, the outgoing governing coalition, adopted a law on the Constitutional Court which was ruled unconstitutional in part by that same Constitutional Court in December 2015. That law adopted by the last parliament, by the last government, had, according to experts, to be remedied. A number of judges were to take up their posts at the Constitutional Court after the elections. We had to change that. There were going to be 14 judges nominated by the outgoing government. Yet the same Venice Commission that has already been mentioned has made clear that there should be democratic representation on the Constitutional Court. Hence, the ruling party should not appoint the vast majority of judges. We did the necessary. We did the necessary. The President's decision not to accept the oath of the new judges enabled the new Parliament to carry out the necessary changes. It is the prerogative of Parliament to appoint new judges. The Constitutional Court ruled on the 7th of January that it did not have within its remit the right to assess the constitutional validity of that decision. We have 15 judges on the Constitutional Court. The majority were appointed by the previous government. A minority were appointed by the new government majority, which has never tried to seek a majority on the Constitutional Court. What we have sought to do is to restore equilibrium. I'd like to assure you, honourable members, that we agree that 8 of 15 judges should be chosen by the opposition. That is something which demonstrates the extent to which we respect the opposition, we acknowledge its rights, and that shows how different we are to the previous coalition government. In order to safeguard pluralism on the Constitutional Court, the new Parliament has decided that the Constitutional Court should rule as a full court, as is the case in many other EU member states. Decisions should be taken by a qualified majority of 2/3 of the members of the Constitutional Court. Since the Constitutional Court rulings effectively decide on the constitutionality of law, its decisions should be based on the same majority as votes on the Constitution in Parliament. That is 2/3 in many EU member states, as I know you are very well aware, because you come from those same member states. That will require judges to seek compromises, to take inclusive decisions. It's important to eliminate further misunderstandings concerning the court rulings in December. The discussion surrounding the Constitutional Court is a political one, not a legal one. The Constitutional Court is a court of law. It is not a court of facts. It assesses the constitutionality of laws and therefore decides on the fate of laws. Unlike general courts, the Constitutional Court does not decide on individual decisions. Decisions taken by the Constitutional Court in December have already been overturned. There is no need to take any further action on that score. But I'd like to say once again, honourable members, that the dispute over the Constitutional Court in Poland is a political one, not a legal one. Hence, the outcome can only come through political compromise in Poland. It is an internal matter for Poland itself. I am ready to talk to the opposition about the proposals that we are making. Honourable members, as regards changes to the media, those changes have been undertaken by the Parliament with a view to turning public media in Poland into truly impartial broadcasters. No legal standards have been breached, and the objective is objectivity in reporting. We seek media pluralism, we seek equality of access, we seek honesty in the media. Those are the objectives. 3 weeks ago, the Polish Parliament amended legislation on public broadcasting as a prelude to further media reform. In the first stage of reform, we looked at the management of public broadcasters, where there were clear breaches of European standards. The Polish broadcasting there was a need to break the link between the Polish broadcasting regulator and the management boards of the public broadcasters. This is in line with Venice Commission recommendations in 2010. As a media market regulator, the National Regulatory Authority is able to continue its work. The government is now working on further amendments to media legislation in order to ensure the stable financing of the public broadcasters. The kind of legislation we are in the process of adopting reflects legislation in other EU member states. The government of the Republic of Poland is open to dialogue, is open to debate. We'd like there to be mutual understanding between political parties in Poland, between parties that support the government and the opposition, with a view to effecting change in Poland. We're open to dialogue, we're open to talks, we're open to joint solutions to Poland's problems. I think that what is important to all of us is for us to feel that we are being supported by the European Union. We want to feel that Poland is a free and sovereign European Union member state that can always count on the EU's support. And as Poland takes decisions on its internal order, its sovereignty is respected. Honourable members, I look forward to answering your questions, as indeed are all the members of my government. Poland is a beautiful country. The Poles are a proud nation. We want to be European Union champions. That for years has been the dream of Poland's people. We have wanted freedom, justice, sovereignty, and now we have these values. We value them tremendously, we cherish them. Honourable members, I thank you for your attention, and I sincerely hope that my explanation will have helped you understand Poland and recent events there. I think it is dialogue and mutual understanding that can be the foundation of a bright future for the European Union. Thank you very much indeed.
Vielen Dank. Vielen Dank, Frau.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. For the EPP now, Mr. González Pons speaks.
It's okay.
Señora Primera Ministra, el
Prime Minister, the President of my group, Manfred Weber, is German, and in the spirit of the greatest respect, he has invited me to take the floor so that nobody would invoke nationality as an excuse or an opportunity to evade one's responsibility. One of our Vice Presidents is Polish, but again, with due respect, nobody from Poland will actually take the floor on behalf of the group here, again, so that nobody can be making excuses or be thought to evading responsibility. President, it's not normal in Europe that we should have to take precautions to try to prevent words becoming political weapons. This is not normal. I am a Spaniard who is a member of the EPP. It could in fact be any group member addressing you here because we share one view, which is that Europe is a community of united values and a market. It is a community of united values, and that first and foremost, and therefore I'd like to assure you that my entire group believes this. Europe is not Brussels, it's not Berlin, it's not Paris. Europe is 500 million people, citizens of the continent, who want to live together. The Polish people has battled dictatorships and defeated them. It has battled Nazism and we supported them. It has battled communism and we supported Poland. Now all Europeans are battling against the scourge of terrorism, and we are doing so together. But authoritarianism does not always come from outside, and it knows no necessary bounds. It can end our freedoms, our beliefs and our values. The Poles know all too well, as indeed do the Spaniards and the Portuguese, the Italians, the Germans, the Romanians, the Slovenians, the French and the Greeks, that the worst of authoritarianism can always come from inside and can bring about the destruction of judicial power and sanctioning or muzzling of the media, which can be but the beginning of the end of democracy. The problem is not Poland. The problem is that an authoritarian approach tends to reproduce itself repeatedly. The errors of the past have a tendency to repeat themselves, and the horrors of the past are there so that we avoid repeating them. We don't want to relive them again. We don't want to relive them every day. We've all lived through horrors in the past, and we have now created reconciliation rather than rancor, a Europe of respect and human dignity, a Europe which is founded on Roman law and Christian morals. This is a Europe which does not know any empire but that of law, and we want to be quite sure that our values continue to be respected and not jeopardized nor endangered. We don't want anybody to prejudge. We don't want anyone to condemn. We want to look and appraise actions, and this is simply a moment, I think, for us to clarify any misunderstandings that may have arisen. Nobody wishes to condemn the Polish government in advance, certainly not the EPP group. The members of our group who are Polish would certainly never allow us to do that in any way. We therefore await the results of the dialogue with the Commission, and we would encourage all parties to act with care and caution, as has been done hitherto, and I am sure that you will then have the right to enjoy full legitimacy to develop your governmental program in Poland when the moment comes. But at the moment there are issues such as the protection of the rule of law which affect all of us, and we do not wish to delude ourselves. We need to be good partners, and we therefore need to look each other in the eye, and we need to speak to each other the truth at every point. This is what we did with the Greek government. This is what we are doing with the British government, and this is why we hope that we can look each other in the eye, speak the truth and recognize how things are. Prime Minister, it's not a question of law, it's a question of values. And you, representing any legitimate government, are in a position to change the law, but you cannot change values any more than any other government can, never.
For the Social Democratic Group, Chairman Mr. Pittella.
Thank you. The Socialists and Democrats, without a shadow of a doubt, stand side by side with the thousands of Poles who have taken to the streets this week to defend the rule of law and democracy.
Signora Primo Ministro,
Madam Prime Minister, we very much appreciate the tone of your statement here today. We don't want to look as if we are calling your country to account, nor as if we are trying to overturn a democratic election result, nor intervene in the internal affairs of your country. You have every right to govern in full autonomy and to make the choices that you make. But this must be done in the full respect of the values, the principles and fundaments of European law. Poland is one of the pillars of the European Union by virtue of its history and by virtue of its battle against totalitarianism of various sorts through the course of the 20th century. Indeed, it stands as a shining example to all of us, and what is being done by your government, Madam Prime Minister, tends to call this into question. An independent constitutional court and independent media are the absolute prerequisites for a state founded on the rule of law. And this is why it is important for the European Commission to have taken the decision that it has. And I'd like to extend my thanks to Vice President Timmermans, because it's not just a marriage of convenience, nor is it a scapegoat. The European Union is a community of values, a community of freedoms, and a community of democracies. And Europe needs a free and strong Poland. Prime Minister, we have been reflecting on the measures which you have taken in the spirit of dialogue and in a spirit of debate, as has been said just recently by Mr. Timmermans. We recognize that Poland is a great country and we will not abandon it. But we would advise you not to take it along a path which is not in line with its history and its vocation.
Thank you very much. For the ECR Group, Chairman KAMALL.
Thank you very much. As we assemble here this afternoon, I can sense MEPs chomping at the bit to lay into the Polish government. But before you unleash your volley of words, let me make a plea for everyone to take a step back, to allow the European Commission and the Venice Commission of the Council of Europe to work with the Polish government to address the concerns that have been expressed. Having spoken to Polish MEPs, ministers and the Prime Minister earlier today, it is clear that they have no intention of undermining pluralism and the rule of law. Why is it that when the last government passed a law to stuff the Constitutional Court with their nominees before they left office, why is it the Commission did not open an investigation or MEPs here did not complain? Why the sudden complaints when the new government seeks to appoint only 5 out of 15 judges on the Constitutional Court? We should welcome the constructive talks that President Duda has held with the Court's President. We should welcome the Polish government inviting the Venice Commission to give its opinion. We should welcome the new government separation between the regulator and the broadcaster. But when the new government tries to bring its practices in line with other countries in EU law, it is accused of political interference in the media. Now, when I worked on the Audiovisual Media Services Directive, I was shocked by the number of MEPs from one large member state who sat on the boards of public broadcasters, interfering in legislation, ignoring the obvious conflict of interest. In this chamber, there are former and national politicians who would phone editors of newspapers or TV stations, complaining, and leading some of them to be sacked. So if you decide to gang up today on the democratically elected government of Poland, you will also be pointing fingers at the people who voted for that government. And don't be surprised if the Polish people respond by electing more Eurosceptic politicians, as in Hungary, Italy and France. So in this climate, I would appeal to everyone to be careful about their choice of words. When Mr Berlusconi came to this Parliament and made comments linking Mr Schulz's to Germany's National Socialist past, many here were offended. So I ask you to consider your reaction when a German politician goes on the media to talk about elements of a coup in Poland and comparing the Polish government to Vladimir Putin. You must realise just how offensive this is to the Polish people, who had to endure Russian imperialism, who had to endure German National Socialism, and who had to endure Soviet socialism. So let us in this House focus on the real crisis facing the EU. Migration, the Eurozone and low growth. And let us allow the Polish government to work constructively with the European Commission and the Venice Commission to reach conclusions based on facts and fairness. Given the historic suffering of the Polish people at the hands of tyranny and their noble fight for liberation from their oppressors, I have no doubt that a new Polish government will cooperate with all those who wish to cooperate with them to ensure that Poland reinforces the freedom, the pluralism and the democracy for which the Polish people fought for so long.
Für die liberale Fraktion.
For the Liberal Group, Chairman VERHOFSTADT.
Minister, thank you very much, first of all, for your presence, also for the tone that you have used. I'm going to try to follow your path and your example on the tone. Not always easy for me. But you and your party won the elections, and you and your party got a strong mandate to lead your country. And we respect this, and we have to respect this. In fact, as a Liberal Democrat, I may not like all of your policies, but that is not our policies, that's your responsibility. This is how it works in a real democracy. And based on your broad majority, it's your right to reshape the media landscape, to reform the civil service. I can tell you, I was Prime Minister, I did similar things myself. But that's not the point here. The point is, and what makes us concerned, what alarms most members here in the House, and what a Democrat never does, is then to use or abuse this huge majority to dismantle the checks and balances in the country. That doesn't happen. Because why? This is the core of European democracy. It's a system, this system of check and balances makes it possible to enact laws when these laws are in contradiction with the Polish constitution. And I think that the legislation on the Constitutional Tribunal, which your majority rushed through the Parliament, I think it was on Christmas Day, does exactly this. It eliminates, it paralyzes, in fact, the Constitutional Court, and I have to tell you that was not announced in the manifesto of your party before the elections. And it is not, I'm going to be very precise to you, it's not the composition or the nominations, Mr. Kamall, will make the problem. It's not the quorum that you have increased with the problem. It's not the two-thirds majority that you impose that is the problem. It's not even the enforced chronological order of cases that is now introduced as a new rule. Some of the member states, you said it yourself, have also some of these rules. But they don't have them all together. And that's precisely the point. It's the combination of all four elements that definitely paralyze the courts and make it impossible to do their work. And I tell you very clear, it is fair enough, Mr. Kamall, that the Polish government rectified the mistake made by the previous majority. But you don't do that, you don't rectify it, by paralyzing then this constitutional court. And I think really also in your tone that you feel yourself there is a problem. I feel it in your voice. And that is the reason also why you follow the advice of Mr. Timmermans to ask for the opinion, what's a good thing, of the Venice Commission. But let me say one thing, it should be a very bad thing if we bring Poland eastwards to another system. It's true, I have once used, Mr. Kamall, the word Putin. And I know that Mr. Kaczynski does not like Putin and Russia. Neither I am on the blacklist. He not, but I am. So, but with these policies, Mr. Kaczynski, I have said, helps Mr. Putin, because the inconvenient truth here is that Mr. Putin doesn't like European unity. He wants, in fact, he has an obsession. He wants to destroy European unity, and what's happening in Poland, that could help him in his course. Never forget, Mr. Prime Minister, history has proved that Polish unity and strength go hand in hand with European unity and strength, and vice versa. But I have, in fact, no doubt. I have faith I think there is no problem, because there are the Polish people and the Polish citizens. What I have seen, and knowing the Polish people gave rise to Solidarność. They fought against repression, they fought for their freedom, for democracy, for the freedom of religion, the rule of law. All this they did. Well, I know that the Polish people shall never accept to give up their democracy. And so my plea to you, Prime Minister, is I would like to encourage you not so much to listen to me or to us. Listen to the majority of your own citizens who want to, in the future, that their country stays in this world community of democracies. Thank you very much.
Für die Vereinigte Linke hat
For the United Left, Chairman, Mrs. Zimmer. Prime Minister Szydło, thank you very much for coming along to the European Parliament today to have critical questions posed. Of course, it goes without saying that it is your responsibility as head of government to ensure that the Constitution is upheld. There is nobody here that would question that. A lot has already been said about the importance of upholding human dignity, the rule of law, the respect of human rights, and membership of the EU is all part of that, but it does require independent courts and an independent media, and this is the question that we are really asking you. It's a question that we're putting to you, and I think it's great that you've accepted the report to be done by the Venice Commission on that. We will then continue to discuss it, and we also welcome the fact that the Commission has started an investigation, an investigatory procedure, which, and I think it's the first time that they've used that, because it didn't exist prior to this time in this format, that is going to be used at any time when a member state causes a concern or raises questions, irrespective of what that member state is or the political constellation that is empowering that member state. This has to be the way we do it. It has to be a sober, factual, objective, structured dialogue that we have with each other in which there is mutual respect. It's not about democratic legitimacy of the Polish government, it's about the rule of law of action taken. And this is the reason why we wish to remain in discussion with each other. The problems, and let me at this juncture just point out that this hasn't emerged from nowhere. New liberal and radical reforms that were a prerequisite for the accession to the EU back when have not brought welfare and well-being to everybody. There have been people excluded and there has been frustration amongst many, and this has led to dissatisfaction not only in Poland but in other Eastern European countries, and it has been difficult to discuss the advantages of the European Union, the question of values of freedom and democracy and equality. And above all, the European Union is perceived to be the reason for this cleavage in Polish society, and I think you and your government cannot say that we have been elected to remove or put right what was done before. There was a government before which in which the PIS was represented, and a liberal government in which the question of fighting poverty wasn't properly discussed and made into a topic. So we mustn't apply double standards in Europe. We have standards and human rights for everybody. And you said, Mrs. Szydło, that Poland wants to be a champion in the European Union. I would certainly support that. I don't want Germany to have a leadership role. I want us all to be there together, and the Eastern and Central European countries that joined have a lot to catch up. They've got a lot to contribute, and in the accession process and the follow-up process there have been many mistakes made, and my plea would be, when you say that you wish Poland to be a champion, ask yourself the question about migration. It cannot be the case that Poland says 400 this year. No, that's not possible. Please, not. That's one of the central questions. The other plea I have to you to finish now is this. Poland has an opt-out on the Fundamental Rights Charter. Would it not be a good sign, would it not be a strong sign now if you were to drop that opt-out and Polish citizens could then avail themselves of the full panoply of the rights under the European Fundamental Charter?
Für die Fraktion der Grünen hat jetzt das Wort Frau
Ms. Harms, on behalf of the Green Group.
Sehr geehrte Frau Premierministerin,
Madam Prime Minister, I'm sure that you have already grasped the tenor of the debate here. There is great concern about what is happening in Poland and the rule of law in Poland, but behind that, I'm sure you have also sensed that there are wider concerns on the part of the European Union and about the European Union. We need the rule of law to work, we need respect for a constitutional state, and were this to be a threat, it would mean that many things were awry with the European Union. It would call into question the whole process of legislation and fundamental freedoms, because if we don't have respect for a state of constitutional law based on the rule of law, then we have nothing. So I think we've all been brought in mind of this today. We've been brought in mind of many other things too. For example, the fundamental role that the Polish people has played in bringing the European Union to where it is. I am a German politician, and in that capacity I would like to distance myself from some of those who have said in recent weeks that the legislation that you've enacted is not correct. And is it right that the Polish and other countries in the Central and Eastern Europe are members of the European Union? Were they actually in a position to be integrated into the European Union? Now, in my experience, I remember August 1980, I remember the magic of this time, and I remember the battles that the Poles began to fight for freedom and for democracy, not just for Poland, but for others too. This was a major, major victory for democracy and stability in the European Union as a whole, and we have eternal gratitude to you for that. But precisely because we value this so greatly, and because we esteem your achievements so greatly, it is very difficult for me to conceive of the assertions that have been made recently being true. I can barely conceive that you have actually enacted the measures that I am told have been enacted and are to be enacted, and it's citizens. It's not just political opponents of yours who are saying this. Mateusz Kijowski, for example, is here today and has come to Strasbourg in order to be here, and is very important in the further course of the debate, I'm sure, to hear from him. We've already heard valuable points being made. I think that Guy Verhofstadt is very right in what he says about the questions concerning the rule of law. It's not a question of individuals or personalities. It's a question of the impression that a government majority is in a position to issue a diktat, and that there isn't even any attempt to have a debate between government and opposition. There are decisions which are being simply taken and implemented overnight without any attempt at discussion, let alone debate. And this is a fundamental and integral part of the process of the rule of law. It's something which we have all experienced in real terms in practice. It has to be used, and this is the way that laws should be made. And we feel that decisions should be made at the end of a debate, and that's why we are going to make no decisions during the course of this debate, because we feel that such selective approach to legislation is not the way forward. The Greens have always believed that it is essential to have instruments in place to review and monitor compliance with the precepts of the constitutional state and the rule of law, because, as I said, this is a fundamental pillar of the European Union. This does not mean that there should be any scope for protecting party political views, and that is not something that we'd wish to see. We would like to see a debate, for example, on the Copenhagen Commission, we would like to see some initiative which would actually end
Für die EFDD-Fraktion hat jetzt
For the EFDD, Mr. IWASZKIEWICZ.
Pani premier, szanowni
Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, as the first Polish member of the European Parliament to speak in this debate, I'd like to stress that Polish issues should be resolved in Poland by Poles. I am very disappointed at the way some members have brought about this debate for reasons that are unclear and which is based on questionable legal grounds. As you yourself have said, Prime Minister, there will be benefits from this debate. The Italians with their socialist Prime Minister, the Germans, the Hungarians are increasingly doing un-European things, and there is a danger to the EU. In Poland we have very bad experience with foreign interference in Polish affairs. We lost our independence for 125 years after the partitions between Russia, Austria and Prussia. We lived under several decades of fraternal help from the Russians. Now we have the fraternal help of European commissioners. But it would be best for Poland and best for Europe if the Poles looked after their own affairs. Thank you.
Für die ENF-Fraktion hat jetzt das Wort.
For the ENF group now, Mr. MARUSIK.
Panie Przewodniczący.
Mr. President, Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Jarek. We very much speak from the same hymn sheet. I speak on behalf of the Europe of Nations and Freedom group, but also as a Pole. As a Pole, I am not worried about criticism from abroad. Criticism from abroad could mean that the Polish government has done something in the Polish national interest, and I'm pleased about that. Nor am I worried about the positive or negative opinions expressed in this chamber because they do not affect the debate in Poland. We can resolve our own affairs there. The problem is the fact that this debate is happening at all. That's the problem with Europe. This is an ostentatious manifestation of external interference in the internal affairs of a sovereign country. That is a European Union disease. This debate has nothing to say. This debate cannot speak on the subject of Polish democracy. What this debate does is to speak volumes about the catastrophic situation that the European Union is in as a political project. The European Union is running away from its own problems, from issues that it cannot resolve. As member of the Europe of Nations and Freedoms group, I appeal to you, members, to open your eyes. This project has run out of steam. It is running on empty. We need a new form of coexistence of sovereign, independent European nations. That is the challenge that we face, and that is what we owe our countries and our voters.
Das Wort hat jetzt der
And now Mr. Korwin Mikke, who is non-attached. Mr. President, I'm not a Democrat. I hate democracy. Democracy is vile. I want you to understand the Democrats in Poland voted for PIS. You wanted democracy? You've got democracy. PIS has a majority. PIS can do what it likes. If you think PIS is a bad party, I agree with you. But imagine how bad the previous lot were. They stole. They were corrupt. I lost my freedom of speech under them. The people of Poland elected PIS because PIS heralded hope. The hope that some people could actually end up behind bars where they belong. I believe the European Union should be destroyed. Now for the EPP group, I give the floor to Mr. ZVER.
Prime Minister, 2 years ago, when this mechanism on the rule of law was conceived, it didn't appeal to everybody, but I think nevertheless we have taken a step in the right direction. It's not just about Poland, it's about the rule of law, and this is one of the key values of the European Union and the reason why this new mechanism is being used by the Commission, and there are places where it ought to have been applied more than in Poland, such as in Slovenia, where the judiciary works very badly. The Court of Human Rights has established the fact that in Slovenia there are very many violations, and according to Eurostat they have a very poor image. And so it's not surprising, therefore, that there has been this political abuse of powers. The former Prime Minister and the head of the Slovene opposition movement were before the courts for 7 years and ended up in prison without any proof. And the Constitutional Court later threw out those charges. But political abuse, I think, has also been visible in as much as in December last year the police conducted a raid of the SDS, the biggest party, in order to confiscate servers, and there are many examples of that kind. So the European Commission hasn't taken corresponding action in those cases, even though they have been brought to their attention, and these acts were committed by people under the previous system. So Slovenia needs the same aid here as Poland does to move on the path to full rule of law. Thank you.
The next speaker on behalf of the Social Democratic Group is Ms. Fajon.
Hvala lepa, predsednik. Tudi približno ni
President, far be it from me to criticize either Poland or the Polish people. On the contrary, Poland has offered inspiration to millions of Europeans down the course of history, and it is an absolutely essential and integral member of the European Union. It contributes towards our institutions, and it is important that it upholds its own institutions and independent media and continues to operate on the basis of the rule of law. I used to be a journalist, and this new media law is a retrograde step in terms of independent, impartial media. It surprises me, Prime Minister, that you assert anything to the contrary, because many media organisations have flagged this up as a matter of concern. And I find this reform that you've introduced to the media rather surprising. I don't think that it is likely to be conducive to an even-handed, impartial representation in the media. I'm concerned about the lack of dialogue too. It's necessary to have dialogue to find solutions. I think it is essential that the Commission has taken this step, because if the rule of law is under threat, this must be done.
Now on behalf of the ECR group, Mr. LEGUTKO. Thank you very much, Mr. President, Prime Minister. There are 4 issues I want to raise. One is language. I note with satisfaction the tone of this debate, the language employed in this debate. the tone of the Prime Minister was so persuasive that even Mr. Verhofstadt was able to adopt it, to my absolute delight. But I'd also like to say that this language needs to be maintained, because what we had seen until now was verbal aggression towards the Polish government before it had even been set up. That's a world record of some kind. Things were said that destroyed communication. If you talk about a coup d'etat in Poland, then you either don't know what you're saying or you are deliberately twisting language. The second issue is facts. Mr. President, Commissioner, I read a document which appeared in the wake of a meeting of the college, and it's not a pretty document. My question is this: from where does the European Commission obtain its facts? Who does your legal analysis for you? Who delivers your facts? The description of the facts astonishes me. Yet, despite the information received from the Polish government, there's no sign of it in this document. Did you file it away? Did you put it in the bin? Did you get your information from the media? How can you draft a document on the basis of which decisions are taken in this way? Gentlemen, come on. I think you have to admit that your facts are lacking. The third issue is double standards, a chronic and potential fatal condition afflicting the European Union. Mr. Pittella, Ms. Harms were talking about demonstrations and their hearts being with the demonstrators. For the past 8 years, we've seen much bigger demonstrations in Poland, and yet, Mrs. Harms, Mr. Pittella, I didn't hear your hearts bleeding for those immense crowds of people who even came to Strasbourg, who even came to Brussels, to the European Parliament. Did you step out? Did you address those people who may have had something important to say? Ladies and gentlemen, in the last 8 years in Poland, and this is vital information for you, in the last 8 years in Poland, we had a kind of one-party state. Poland was a one-party state. There was one political party which ran practically all the institutions. And now suddenly I hear that this is not personal. If my party were to field 14 judges in the Constitutional Court, there would be uproar in this chamber. And yet I hear from you that this is not an issue. Where were you when the public broadcasters were sacking journalists right, left and centre? Ladies and gentlemen, all of you have just been listening to what you wanted to hear. Everyone was fired. Everyone was fired. And what happened here? Nothing. Pin drop silence. These double standards, unfortunately, demonstrate that in the European Union there are countries which are more equal than others. There are political parties which are more equal than others. If we are going to continue down this path, it is not us that is going to suffer, it is the European Union. This action that is being taken is anti-European Union. The final issue I want to tackle is people exceeding their remit. Mr. President, Commissioner, I think you're aware that the instrument you're using is dodgy, to say the least. The legal services of the institutions have questioned it. It isn't firmly entrenched in the treaties. It is very, very wobbly in legal terms. Members of the European Parliament are planning a motion for resolution. I understand the Commission is digging up facts. Apparently this resolution is going to be written before the facts are analysed by the Commission. Why do you need facts if you can write your resolution without? As you've said yourself, this is not just you exceeding your remit, because the European Commission is not going to dictate the type of majority that should be required in the Polish Constitutional Court. What you have said demonstrates that you want to set a precedent. You want the European Commission to have these powers which you don't have, and you want to use this vehicle to be able to act illegally in future. And that's very, very bad.
Das Wort hat für die liberale Fraktion.
On behalf of the Liberal Group now, Ms. In't Veld.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome, Madam Prime Minister. Welcome, supporters and opponents of the government. This shows that the European Parliament is the arena for debate about our shared values. This is not about interfering in national matters or attacking one country or another. This is about standing up for the core values of the European project. Now, the Polish government, with the majority that it has won, has the responsibility to maximise the space for opposition and criticism, not minimise it. You have to strengthen checks and balances and not weaken them. And I've listened to you very carefully, Madam Prime Minister, but I'm not fully reassured if I hear your party leader taking Mr. Orbán for an example, who in turn takes Mr. Putin for an example. So I do feel that the European Commission initiative is justified, but it does seem arbitrary and there are accusations of party politics. Why Poland, not Hungary? Or indeed, why no questions about the state of emergency in France? Now, the debate here shows that there is a need for an EU-wide mechanism that is based on objective and transparent criteria to assess all the member states and the EU institutions in the same way. And I see Mr. Timmermans smiling because he knows that we are elaborating such a mechanism here in Parliament. And I would be delighted, Mr. Timmermans, Mr. Koenders, if Council and Commission would take up the invitation of European Parliament and elaborate such a mechanism for the whole of the European Union together. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. In't Veld. The next speaker is Ms. Spinelli for the United Left.
Condivido la preoccupazione.
I share the concerns of many of my colleagues. The neo-nationalism of your government is a matter of grave concern. As far as many Poles are concerned, the restriction of the powers of the Constitutional Court and the media is a source of massive concern, which flies in the face of all the principles of the European project. At the same time, I would like to remind you that Poland voted for a government which is very critical of the European Union, and that is because the policies of austerity in the European Union have exacerbated inequalities in that country and created a huge amount of social resentment, which has focused hope on the right. Social justice is a universal right in Europe as well, you know, and we must not be using double standards. We have one standard for Italy, one for Hungary, one for Poland. Governments must be treated in the same way, and one government must not be finding higher prices exacted of it than another, especially not just because it's supported by a less strong group than the EPP.
Thank you. Sargentini now on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you very much, President. President, let there be no doubt about this. The Greens are concerned about the changes to the legislation in Poland, which we think is anti-democratic in tenor. But I would like to say in the presence of the Dutch Foreign Minister that some of the ways in which we deal with our neighbours are inappropriate. We need reciprocal trust, such as Mr. Timmermans mentioned. Now, I could cite Nord Stream, the gas pipe from Russia to the Netherlands and Germany. Poland's interests are just being ridden over roughshod and ignored. Now, this is something which is alleged to be understandable politics, but Geert Wilders has also spoken in a similar way. What Mr. Rutte, the Dutch Premier, has actually not distanced himself from what was said. He's been invited to come here and expand on that, but has declined so to do. Central and Eastern European countries simply don't appreciate this. They feel that it is inappropriate for the Dutch government to be failing to engage on this important issue. We need to take measures, we need to learn lessons here in Europe, and that is the way that we can achieve success if we're prepared to recognize how others feel and negotiate in dialogue.
Das Wort hat jetzt für die EF.
Now on behalf of the EFDD group, Mr. Mach.
Dámy a pánové.
Ladies and gentlemen, the situation we face is scandalous. The European Union is taking action against Poland with a view to taking that country's voting rights away. And yet what is it that Poland has done? Poland has decided that there should be a 2/3 majority for any decision in the Constitutional Court. All that Poland is doing is things which have been done in other EU member states. This is merely a smoke screen. The European Commission is upset about the fact that the winning party in the Polish elections doesn't like the European Union in its current form. It doesn't want to accept the diktat of migrant quotas. That is what this is about. This is scandalous interference in the affairs of a sovereign country. In 1963, J.F. Kennedy declared in Berlin, under siege, Ich bin ein Berliner. I think that now we have to stand behind Poland. And as a proud, free citizen, let me say in Polish, I am a Pole.
Für die ENF-Fraktion hat jetzt das.
Mr. Schaffhauser now for the ENF group.
Madam Prime Minister, colleagues. Mr. Schulz was telling us about a coup d'etat, even a so-called Putinization of Polish politics. Ooh la la. Yes, the PIS is a popular party. The attack against Poland at the moment is attack by a European system against democracy and the people that chose their sovereignty, freedom and independence in solidarity. People who still believe in the Christian roots of humanism, and humanism is not the creation of a new European order which is supreme in its disorder. Yes, Poland is a people who have stood up and helped bring down the wall. Yes, they are conservative and they've got their values. They want a family made up of a mother and a father. They respect life. They believe in truth, rights, justice. They're Catholic, not liberal in the hands of sects which control society via finance and the media. Colleagues, the European system is failing. Its democracy is a dictatorship which forces people to do what they don't wish to do or ignore a vote against the European Constitution, for example. A coup d'etat that is going on is the one in the European system. Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, Czech Republic, the countries that are friends of the Velvet Revolution, brought together to bring about the fall of the wall, stood up against this dictatorship and are prepared to attack, destabilize any government which does not work for foreign powers which govern here and seek to govern the European peoples. I am an Alsatian, and I also resist German arrogance. We, the French patriots, do not, with our Polish friends, accept Germany dominating the Eurozone, trying to bring about conformity for the new Reich of democracy. And I would ask this Assembly to come back to its senses. Yes, is it a crime to be conservative, Christian, etc.? Believe me, this is only the beginning. The revolt by the people is starting, and it is what you deserve.
Jetzt der Ich muss das jetzt leider noch mal wiederholen.
Let me repeat again to the public on the gallery. Our rules of procedure make clear that people on the public gallery are not entitled to participate in the debate. We are very hospitable, but if you were to behave like that in the Polish Parliament, you would be thrown out. So please do refrain from commenting on proceedings in any way. The next speaker is Mr. CHAUPRADE.
Madame le Premier ministre, Monsieur le Président, chers
Prime Minister, President, colleagues, when I listen to Ms. Harms or Mr. Verhofstadt, I think it's not Poland that's got a problem with the rule of law and the constitutional states, it's the institutions of the European Union. When I hear the European Commission talking about the alleged problem of Poland, then I think that this problem itself, this Commission itself, has a problem with facts and reality. Has it actually looked at the speaking time in Poland before the election of peace? Has it looked at the Constitutional Court in Poland, how it was before the PIS was elected? Do you actually think that the Polish people who fought so hard for their freedom would actually allow it to be sacrificed in that way? I was reading an interview of Piotr Kaczynski, who is a Polish politolog who's not terribly close to PIS as far as we're aware, and he himself feels that there are no concerns such as you've been alleging. My country, France, has a constitutional court which is directly elected. The audiovisual services heads are appointed by the President and the Senate. This could be viewed in a similar way. I think that this is simply a false pretext which is being invoked in order to destabilize a democratically elected government. And I therefore would say I am a Pole too. From my heart, I too am a Pole in the respect of liberty.
Now on behalf of the EPP group, Mr. Olbrycht. Madam Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, Poland is something that all of us Poles share, that we have to look after. We are proud of our country, we are proud of the Polish people. We are proud of all Polish people, regardless of their European views. We regret the fact that Poland is now the subject of a European debate. This is the first time since we joined the EU, and I hope it's the last. The Prime Minister is aware that we did not initiate this debate, we did not want this debate. Regardless of the outcome of this debate, the debate will affect Poland's standing on the international stage. We acknowledge you won the democratic elections in Poland. We acknowledge your right to carry out changes in line with your manifesto. If, however, you think that the winner takes all, that suggests that the winner is not just going to take control over institutions, but also take responsibility for changes affecting the rule of law. The winner must also accept the responsibility for the image of Poland in Europe and abroad, as well as taking responsibility for this debate. Poland deserves better. We very much regret that this has happened.
Das Wort hat jetzt für die S&D.
And now, on behalf of the S&D group, Mr. Weidenholzer. You need to use the microphone, Mr. Weidenholzer.
Thank you very much, President, Prime Minister. Well, I welcome the debate we're having today. I think it's important that this should take place, that it is timely, and that it is an objective debate. It's not a question about prejudices against Poland. We don't want Poland bashing here. Poland is a very important country. It's important for Europe's history and identity. It's an integral part of that. Poland played a huge role in overcoming the communist dictatorship. Europe without Poland would not be Europe. So it's not indifferent what happens in Poland. We respect the vote of the Polish people, but we are concerned when the first measures taken by the new government has called forth such protest from large parts of the population. Just because a party is elected democratically doesn't mean it can change the rules of the game to such extent that democracy is no longer ensured. These are fears that many people are expressing. These changes to the Constitutional Court and the media have caused great concern, and the rules for minorities have also to be respected. That is a basic principle of democracy, and I hear a lot of concerns expressed in that direction. Poland has to enter into dialogue. That is an important value. So I think it's very positive that we are holding this debate. It's important that we should have clarity, and there should be an opportunity to clear up any misunderstandings. This debate should be clear, objective and fair. It should give advantages to Poland and to Europe as a whole. Thank you very much, Mr. Weidenholzer. For the ECR group, Mr. Henkel.
Zunächst einmal, Frau Minister.
Thank you, President. First of all, Prime Minister, my respect for having put up to this grotesque inquisition personally and coming here. Mr. Weidenholzer, you pointed out quite rightly that we're not here to prejudge. However, can I ask the President of the House, what is it if you take the view that this is a union a la Putin? Is that not to prejudge the issue? I must say that I've always been very careful when there's been a mistake made to apologise. Do you think that this is not the time and the place to apologise? Now, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Legutko has said that we must not have double standards. And I also agree with that. And I think one can give other examples of double standards. It seems to me that the Commission, instead of looking at Poland, should begin with the infringements of law committed by the European institutions or the big countries. Just three little examples. The numerous breaches of the Maastricht Treaty by the Eurogroup, or the illegal purchase of junk bonds by the ECB, or the breach of the Dublin Convention by Chancellor Merkel. And why is the Commission interested in the Constitutional Court of Poland, but not the fact that three former judges at the German court have described the migration policy in Germany as anti-constitutional? And with regard to media policy in Poland, Mr. Oettinger, Commissioner Oettinger, you should perhaps ask the question why the compulsory fees for the license fee in Germany, the public television, public broadcasting television has given very rosy reporting and has completely elided other important issues which have taken place in the north of Africa, for example. Now, President, who more than the Germans? Who do the Germans have to thank more than the Poles for the end of the wall? For example, Solidarność and several members are now in ministerial posts in Mrs. Szydło's government. First of all, we wanted to save the world's climate, then the euro, then Greece, not once, not twice, but 3 times, now the migrants. And now we're seeking to save Polish democracy. If there was any country which did not need lessons in freedom and democracy, surely it is Poland. Thank you very much.
The next speaker for the Liberals will be Mrs. WIKSTRÖM. Thank you very much, President. Well, I want to be clear and say that even if we are criticising what's happening in Poland today, we also have to stress that we always need to be able to discuss openly with one another and nevertheless remain friends. Poland is a very important part of Europe. Fundamental human rights have to be protected in every European country, whatever their government is. Commissioner Timmermans, it's entirely correct that the Commission examines what is happening in Poland, but it would be hypocrisy if we fail to look at Hungary for the same kinds of issues. It's only normal that the Commission should examine all countries in a similar manner when we're talking about fundamental rights and the rule of law. Madam Prime Minister, if you continue on the road you've taken, there's a danger that you might undermine fundamental rights within your countries and elsewhere. We don't want to see a domino effect in the EU with one country falling after each other without standing up for fundamental rights. Rather, together, we should be standing up to protect our values and principles. That is the foundation for this huge EU project. That is what we will be leaving to future generations. Thank you very much, Mrs. WIKSTRÖM. For the GUI group, Mr. Jarek.
President, if I understand the explanations given to us, democracy is reduced in order to strengthen it. The Charter of Fundamental Rights has been breached in order to improve democracy, so it said. But where are we when the European institutions have offered 3 billion to Turkey, to the government of Erdogan, who has imprisoned journalists and has threatened others? We are now watering down the Europe of freedom of the press and civil liberties. We need to assure pluralism of the press in countries throughout Europe, and it's not too late to do that. I think we can create an observatory on the instruments of justice in each member state. I think that would be a worthy cause. Thank you.
Thank you. For the Green Group, Mr. TERRICABRAS.
Thank you very much.
As President of the IFA Group in this Parliament. In 2011, during the last official census in Poland, 847,000 people declared they have Silesian identity. Only 4 days ago, Jerzy Kozelik called on behalf of over 140,000 people for the recognition of Silesians as an ethnic minority in Poland. During a debate in Polish Parliament on the issue, ruling party MPs threatened Silesians with persecution and even executions. Silesians are still not listed in the law on national and ethnic minorities and on the regional languages of 2005. This is a very alarming and distressing situation. Are we staying in front of a revival of aggression and oppression against minorities in Poland? It would be an anti-democratic shame. Vielen Dank, Herr Präsident.
Thank you very much, Mr. TERRICABRAS. The next speaker for the ENF Group is Mr. Bay.
Madame le Premier ministre.
Madam Prime Minister, after Viktor Orban, it's your turn to come along here to respond to the scandalous accusations that your government has received at the hands of the Eurocrats. You are accused of applying the programme which you were elected on at the end of a perfectly democratic election, a programme which is go ahead to seeking to protect the Poles against the crazy decisions taken by Brussels on migration, instead of calling for more migrants to boost your demography. You have increased child allowances by 500 zlotys in order to help and bring solace to your own people. I think you've demonstrated that another Europe is possible, one with sovereign nations, free peoples who refuse to throw away their birthright. And with your Hungarian, Czech and Slovak neighbours, you are in the process in the east of Europe of creating a consistent bloc refusing the diktats of the Euro globalisation. Long live the free peoples and nations of our old continent. Thank you.
So, das Wort hat jetzt die Frau
The next speaker is the Prime Minister, Mrs. Szydło.
Panie Przewodniczący, Szanowni Państwo.
President, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Thanks to all of you for all your kind words, your words of support or concern. You, I think, share one thing, which is a deep concern for the European Union and its future shape. Poland wants the EU to be stable. Poland wants the EU not to be shaken by different crises. Poland is not the source of such crises, but Poland does want to be an active participant in such a shaping of European policy that would allow us to avoid any future problems. So thank you for all your words of support, of criticism. Thank you for your support for my country and our government. That is very important for us. I have come here to share some information with you, and I tried to use this first opportunity to talk to you, to provide you with more in-depth information on two important areas, some of which for you is source of concern, which is the issue of the Constitutional Tribunal and the issue of the new media law. I was expecting from you detailed questions relating to these two areas, but not many questions have been asked, actually. My impression is that there are no problems, actually, so you have no reasons to ask me detailed questions. And this whole discussion is a problem for us, is a problem that I have to deal with me myself, actually, because I disagree that the European Commission should apply to Poland the decision that it took. But I am open to further exchange of views. I will gladly share more information with you in the interest of the EU and the future of the Union. And we, all of us, we should strive to have European institutions work to the best of their abilities. And we should maybe talk more about our competences and the way we want to work in the future. So let me reiterate now some important facts that maybe escaped your attention in my previous statement. I think Poland does not deserve to be monitored by the European Commission, because human rights are not being breached in Poland. The rule of law is not being breached in Poland, and all the work now being underway in Poland is being carried out in full accordance with Polish legislation and European treaties. We are a sovereign state. We are a free nation. Let me incidentally say that in the Polish Parliament, guests in the audience in the Parliament are allowed to express their support or disagreement with what is going on in the Parliament. But this is our tradition. According to our tradition, in our Parliament, the public can and are allowed to express their feelings and their opinions. We are deeply enamored with our freedom and liberty, because we really did pay a huge price for our freedom, and we will defend it. Our history has taught us a lesson. The lesson is that our Polish problems have to be discussed and solved in Poland, because whenever third parties try to solve our problems for us, that was disastrous for us. So this is my appeal. I'm not saying that we all agree. I'm not denying there is disagreement between us, because disagreement is the very fabric of democratic debate. But this debate should be carried out where it belongs, in the Polish Parliament. The best proof for the fact that Poland is a democratic country is that in the Parliament now we have Polish citizens who are allowed to express their dissatisfaction with the work of the government during the many demonstrations organized here around this Parliament. Poland is a democratic country. I've come here now to you as a Prime Minister of a democratic country. I am deeply concerned because I want all of us to develop a future model of our work and cooperation in Europe which would allow us to avoid such debates, because such debates are baseless and pointless. But I have come here to this Parliament for another reason. The reason is my deep sense of responsibility, not only for what is going on in Poland, but also for what is going on in Europe. So you see, I'm talking about migration. Migration is a huge problem, and you know this very well. Poland has already taken in around 1 million people from the Ukraine. Nobody wanted to help them. We did help them. They are now in Poland. We have to discuss this as well. Poland, the Polish government, is ready for further discussion on migration. We are a country based on the rule of law, and we will respect decisions taken by the previous government, and we will participate in the currently discussed mechanisms of migration in the EU. Can we cope with the problem of migration? Well, all of us, we have to provide an answer to this question, especially here in the European Parliament, because this is what the citizens of Europe are expecting now from us, from you. Let's work towards this goal. This is a major objective for us, a major challenge ahead of us. I don't want Poles to become Eurosceptic. I don't want Poles to be critical of Europe. Therefore, we should spare no effort to make Europe a community of sovereign, well-governed countries. The Polish government will not give up this program that was entrusted to us as a result of the free election that took place in the recent past. We were elected, we won the election, but we won this election because the Polish citizens decided so. And what we will do now is continue with our program, because our electorate wants this from us. Poland, and the Poles have the impression that Poland has not been very just. We want Poland to be a country of equal opportunities, of development. For us, for Poles, it is extremely important that we measure our success by the example of the most successful countries of Europe. We are a young member of the European Union. We joined the EU with the baggage of our history. We, all of us from Central Europe, but we also joined the EU with great hope. We joined a Europe that was a miracle and a dream for us. It was a paragon of equality and fairness, and we want to be in a Europe of equality and fairness. It is not easy for us, of course, because there are still so many problems and barriers for us to overcome, but we are determined to overcome them. Poland now needs work in order to improve our state. President Kaczynski, the tragically dead former president of Poland, said that Poland must be a country also for the weak. And this challenge is still ahead of us. The late Pope John Paul II said, "Never fear." So, ladies and gentlemen, never fear. Let's build an equal and fair Europe. Let's do this together. Let's spare no effort in order for every and single European to have the feeling that they are all equally treated. Poland now does not deserve to be criticized. Let me remind you, we had to amend the previous law on the Constitutional Tribunal because the previous government decided to speed up the work on the law on the Constitutional Tribunal. The first draft law was presented in 2012, but for 3 days nothing happened. Constitution was breached, as decided by the Constitutional Tribunal. Our suggestion is that the opposition have a majority in the tribunal. Now, you talk about the media. Well, the principles on which we are building our media system are the same principles that are in Italy, for instance. We are not doing anything that you have not already done. And now we can talk about many things which are important, but I think, let me reiterate, we have a serious problem with this debate. The new framework presented by the European Commission were met with criticism by the previous government of Poland, led by Mr. Tusk, who was Prime Minister at the time. And back then, the Polish government, in its opinion, also based on opinions by Polish legal experts and other expert opinions, the new framework was not acceptable to Poland.
So there is a problem and it needs to be solved. Today, I have the feeling of injustice that we are subject of this experiment. But I am here and I think it is my duty towards Poland, the Polish state, of which I have the honor of ruling, but also with respect to the European Parliament and the Commission. It was my task to come here and to explain factually how things are going in Poland, because it is needed for all of us. But first of all, it's needed to build the authority of the European Union and European institutions. Thank you very much.
Wir kommen jetzt zu einer abschließenden Runde.
So we'll now have a final round of speakers, 1 minute each.
Das ist zunächst der Herr Abgeordnete Korwin.
The first speaker will be Mr. Korwin Mikke.
Thank you, President. it is with pleasure that I can remark that Mr. González said that there is no other empire than the empire of law in Europe. Even Madame Zimmer said that it's not about democracy, it's about the way you see the law. Rightly so. Either we have rule of law or we have democracy, because the law wants one thing and majority wants something else, and then you have to make your decision, make your choice. I've said it 100 times already, also in this house. In Poland, it's very good example. Someone says that the changes in the court were not in line with the law, and the ruling party says, so what? We are elected and they are not elected. I'm in favor of the rule of law and independent governments, but during the previous government in Poland, the president of the tribunal wrote to the president asking whether it was constitutional or not. So for the rule of law to dominate in Poland, however, it was totally unclear, and I think the European Union should be destroyed. Thank you very much.
The next speaker for ENF will be Mr. Marusik.
Panie Przewodniczący.
President, ladies and gentlemen. To consider the political dilemmas of the situation in Poland, I think this is not the right place to do so. Those things were considered, have been considered, and will be considered in Poland, in Polish institutions. So, let us all quiet down, be more optimistic, and let's have more trust in Europe. There were other big, mighty powers that came and went. There were the Romans, there was the Soviet Union, and they're gone. And Asia is still there. Even if the EU becomes history, then Europe will still be in place. It's dozens of nations who want one and the same thing: freedom and justice. Let us then leave this discussion aside. Let us think about Europe. If you care for the success of Europe, let us think what to do, not to become involved, interfere with countries, companies, businesses, families, and what they do. Not to interfere with what people do. Let everyone live freely the way they want. Let us Europe be free. Let us believe in Europe. Thank you.
Jeżeli można jeszcze słów...
If you allow me, because I can see my time hasn't run up, I am very happy that this debate has provoked this common sense thinking in this chamber, because we used to be left in a cocoon, totally away from the reality that we can see around, both in Europe and in member countries from which we come here. So common sense once again should prevail, and then this debate will take place on specific problems that Europe is facing. Then we will be happy nations in Europe.
Okay. So das Wort hat jetzt...
The next speaker for the EFDD group will be Mr. IWASZKIEWICZ.
Pani Premier, Szanowni Państwo.
Madam Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, the situation in Poland is normal. I'm saying this as a representative of opposition. Parliamentary democracy is working. I will confirm what was said by the two previous speakers, that this debate today is about the borders of the competences of European Commission and European institutions, because the borders are being pushed continuously. More and more competences are added without any justification in European law. The European Commission is trying to be a super government, the boss of all bosses, the supervisor of national governments. It must be said clearly, there is no agreement on their interference into the internal affairs of sovereign nation states. Good advice from German or Belgian politicians can be kept to themselves. You have your own problems of immigrants who are destroying your culture, who are mistreating your women. There is the problem of economic crisis also stupid decisions of politicians. Madam Prime Minister, congratulations on your speech today. I am deeply convinced that the future of Poland is only and exclusively in the hands of the Polish people. It's up to us. All the best.
Für die Fraktion der Grünen hat das Wort.
For the Greens, Mrs. Harms.
Frau Premierministerin, ich war mit vielen polnischen
Prime Minister, in winter 2013-2014, I and many colleagues went to the Maidan Square in Kiev, and many members of your party were there as well. And those colleagues were very committed to the rule of law, to the path of Ukraine towards the West, and in any case against a backward-looking authoritarian path a la Putin, and with examples elsewhere in the European Union. And I must say that what pains me in your response to the debate is that there are colleagues here who are offensive, who want to fight to the destruction of Europe and are financed by President Putin. And you must give careful thought to this and look at the bedfellows there, the allies, and that should be debated in Poland as well. Now, with regard to the discussion, the debate before the House today, can I just say that we are again at a point in time where we have to understand that there are difficult discussions about the rule of law and democratic standards, democratic rules and principles, things which are not uniform or standard in EU law and legislation. These are arguments which we have to have as a matter of urgency, because behind the debate of rule of law in Poland, there is, of course, the whole discussion of what binds us together. Why are we having such difficulty in defining our shared European identity? Why are people and countries after elections drifting away from that? And I think that's what we've got to do. We've got to do that in the context of Poland. I have got a long experience of the rule of law, and I'm confident that your country is not going to go back to authoritarian methods. Thank you.
Zimmer.
The next speaker will be Mrs. Zimmer for the GUI Group.
Sehr geehrte
Madam Prime Minister. Well, I do wonder why I constantly get the idea that what we're seeing is not really being described in the right terms. I replied to Mrs. Harms. It irritated me somewhat that when we hear the declarations about the state of the European Union, when we keep hearing these statements that the EU should be destroyed, then you kind of see that what's happening in practice is not reflecting your words. You say that you're a European. You're saying that we want to be at the forefront of Europe. But we're worried about a retreat back into nationalism. What we do need is a correction, a fine-tuning, as though more than a fine-tuning, a fundamental reform of the EU. But this has to take place on the basis of the fundamental values of the EU, that our citizens in our member states need to see the European Union's added value, something that's worth fighting for, because the alternative would be nations fighting in one another. This is an attempt to distance ourselves from war, that we all need to be able to talk to each other. And that's precisely why I hope to see a signal from you that you have an understanding that Poland is a bridge between West and East. A good part of the members here are very well aware of the problems in Central and Eastern European countries. We do realize that we have to work through a lot of issues in those countries. But my request to you is don't withdraw, don't applaud some of the people on the right of this House. They're the wrong people to listen to. Thank you.
Fraktion der Verhofstadt.
For the Liberals, Mr. Verhofstadt.
Prime Minister, that I admire you in a certain sense, because after a few weeks you already use all the tricks of a Prime Minister. in office. For example, by saying, yeah, I am here to respond to your questions, and nobody had real remarks on what's happening. Why I think, and the Commission and myself have described what the problem is and what the problem is with this change on the Constitutional Court. Let me explain it again, because maybe the translation was not good to Polish. The system is simple. You have nominated 5 in total, new judges in the Constitutional Court. And 3 of them, with the rules you have made, the new rules you have made, you have given a veto right to 3 PES members. That is what you're doing. 3 members of your party can block any decision in the Constitutional Court based on the new rules you have made. That is what's happening. And you don't respond to this. You find it very normal that this is happening. And the only argument you have is to say, and that's also what Mr. LEGUTKO is saying, yeah, but the Platforma did mistakes. That's true, the Platforma did mistakes, but you were elected, you received a victory to do better than Platforma, not to make the same mistakes than Platforma. That is democracy. And you do exactly the same. This is what Mr. LEGUTKO is saying. Yeah, they did things that we didn't like, a one-party state. And now it's our time to make a one-party state for the next years. So I have only one question to you. And I think you can respond to that, at least, as Prime Minister. If the Venice Commission gives a negative opinion, shall you follow this opinion of the Venice Commission?
Das Wort hat jetzt.
And we can maybe have an answer immediately, Mr.
Herr LEGUTKO.
Mr. LEGUTKO, please, for the ECR group.
Dziękuję bardzo. My mamy...
Well, thank you very much. We have 2 major enemies. One enemy is ignorance, and the other enemy is prejudice. It is indeed very difficult to fight prejudice, even with arithmetics. Because if we have a constitutional tribunal where we have 9 to 6 members, the composition is 9 to 6, and the tribunal is required to sit in a certain composition, and the composition of the tribunal means it is hung, which is that it cannot take decisions. So this is absurd. I should not deign with my answer. There is nothing wrong with this composition of the tribunal. It's totally rational, normal construction of the composition of a court. And the question is this. The new tribunal is more representative and does not allow 5 judges to take arbitrary decisions. Such a tribunal, is it better or worse? Well, it is better from the point of view of standards. There is no argument that can question this. This is simply a better tribunal. I would likely get from you an argument to the contrary, but so far I haven't heard it. Now the media. Now, do we have better media now or worse? Do we have a single narrative as previously, or many narratives? We have many different narratives now. And what about those journalists who apparently were sacked 8 years ago? Now they are coming back. So what? We should not hire them now because we don't want to have many narratives?
Thank you. The next speaker will be Mr. Guerrero Salom.
Yes, thank you very much, Prime Minister. In the debate we've just had, there are 3 major lines which I think have been very clearly drawn. First of all, paying tribute to the role that Poland has played in defending its sovereignty throughout the course of history. There's been recognition to what Poland has done in terms of restoring democracy in Europe, but at the same time there is a clear concern on the position that the government is taking with regard to media and the Constitutional Court. Now, everybody has recognized that you have electoral legitimacy and you are able to carry out your government program because of that. Nobody's calling that into question, but the majority a democratic majority cannot justify using democratic tools to leave pluralism defenseless. Pluralism is something which should be seen in the government and in the media. Now, some people have said that, I am Polish. Now, there are some people who are keeping dangerous companies. There are some dangerous liaisons, as it were. But I could take up that motto, I am Polish, but of all the polls, 50% who showed up at the polls, well, the other 50% who chose not to vote did not disenfranchise themselves in so doing. And there's a huge amount of the Polish population that did not support you.
Thank you very much, Mr. González Pons for the EPP.
Thank you, President. Madam Prime Minister, thank you very much for being present this evening for this lengthy debate here at the European Parliament. Now, you've spoken very favorably about the European Union here, and I hope that that will ripple through in your party back in Poland, and I hope that your party will share your views when we, in turn, go to Poland. Now, constitutional courts, political constitutional courts are not useful. We need to have judicial, legal constitutional courts. I'm not convinced that when you say that governments will guarantee the objectivity of the media, I think this is really letting a fox loose among the chickens. It's really up to the people to allow for free press to reign. Now, we're not talking about the law. You do have legitimacy to change the law, but you do not have a remit to change values. We're talking about the government here, and taking unilateral action in this way is something which is very dangerous. We're talking about the rule of law here, not politics. So we're talking about freedom here. As Mr. Weber said, this is a question of unity, not division, and I would agree with what Mr. Guerrero said. There are some who are keeping strange, bedfellows are now saying that they are Polish. Of course, we are proud, and now that you have won the elections, I think it's up to you to facilitate life for your citizens.
Szydło.
Mr. Szydło, please.
Szanowni Państwo.
Ladies and gentlemen, the opinion of the Venice Committee, we are still awaiting it. Let me remind you what I said before. The Polish government has requested by itself an opinion from the Venice Committee. No one had to encourage us to do so. Of course, we'll have a close look at it once it's there. I think it would be much easier for us as well to use arguments, not to hold this debate here today if we had the opinion from the Venice Committee there in the first place, because I am deeply convinced that it's going to show objectively that the legal situation of the Constitutional Tribunal in Poland is excellent. We have not altered the way judges are appointed. It was the previous parliament that chose the members, the 2/3 of the 15 judges. That equals to 10. So it's difficult for 10 people to block 15 people. I think this is clear. I present to you the arguments. I want to present them. Although I think, and I will reiterate that, I think that this debate is totally out of place. But I'm here because I respect the fact that the European Parliament with concern and objectively wants to deal with the problem. Ladies and gentlemen, I will not make reference to the interventions that I consider as out of place in this room, because that I have my sense of dignity as a citizen of the European Union, which dictates me to do so. We are not a nationalistic party, and calling us this name, I think, is offensive. I will not therefore refer to that. But let me reiterate, the Polish government was elected in a fair election by the Polish people. And the Polish government is running Poland because it has a mandate from the Polish people. And it is not the case that the Polish government is something else than Poland, our homeland. No. This is the way democracy works also back where you come from. I can't imagine that I would say that I'm not respecting the government of Spain or of the Netherlands, but I respect Netherlands and Spain. No, you respect the country of the nation that you respect as well. I might disagree with your politics. That's your free right to do so, yes. This is the foundation of Europe, the cornerstone of Europe, that you have different opinions. We have different opinions on things. We very often disagree, but we discuss the things. And that's the huge added value, which to me and to the citizens of Poland, to Poles, to us, is very relevant, because we in Poland, for many years, we didn't have the possibility to discuss things openly. You're saying, you're talking about justice and equality. I'm very happy you mentioned those things. I believe that the European Union will be concerned about problems of Polish economy. You mentioned the Silesian regions, for example. I live nearby. I could say, actually, that I feel strongly attached to this region. I come from the border area of the Silesian region. Silesia is a wonderful region. There are wonderful people there. But Silesia needs assistance from the European Union. So show solidarity to Silesia. Help Polish mines. It's a huge problem for Poland. Silesians are saying the following thing to me. Is the European Union going to help us in our problem? Will they see that we need European assistance today? Or will they leave us to ourselves as they did with the Polish shipyards? I mean, excuse you me, but we have such questions in Poland as well that are being asked of the government. We try to explain to people. We are open to talk and discuss. We want Poles to have a feeling that the European Union is there for them when they need assistance. Therefore, I'm here today with you because I believe in the European Union. I believe in Europe. I believe in the fact that civic society, which you mentioned on many occasions today, I must say, in my government, we appointed a plenipotentiary for civic society because we treat this issue very seriously. And we have a person in charge of civic society. In the previous government there wasn't such a function. And I deeply believe that the good example coming from Poland also on building a civic society, and we have excellent examples from our history. We have the solidarity movement. We had all those things that Poland contributed. That's the foundation on which we can build our common Europe. Europe of sovereign countries. Let us do so. According to the will of the Polish people, let us implement our manifesto, run the country the way we want to. Let us show that Poland is a country which treats law, constitution very seriously. We treat the European Union very seriously as well. I am a European. I'm proud of that. But in the first place, I'm a Polish citizen, of which I'm proud as well. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank, Frau Ministerpräsidentin.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister.
So there has to be a problem of translation because it was done in Polish and I naturally follow in English. My Polish is very badly. but have you said that you're going to follow now the Venice Commission opinion or not? Yes or no? It's the only thing what you did. Yes or no? And that I understand in Polish. Yes or no?
Ja nie mam kłopotu z tłumaczeniem. Ja rozumiem, że pan jest do...
I have no problems with interpretation. I know you're very inquisitive. You want to learn more about Poland, and thank you, President, for allowing this discussion, which is not really quite in accordance with the rules of procedure. I have come here to travel many kilometers to give you full answers to whatever questions you might have. I have no problem understanding what you're saying. So maybe we should listen to one another. Maybe we should really want to understand one another. So let's talk about facts and not prejudice. The decision, the opinion, has not been issued yet. We are waiting for such an opinion. Once the opinion has been issued, we will analyze it in great depth.
Herr Koenders. Okay, aber Herr Kollege Verhofstadt, auch mit der Antwort.
Well, Mr. Verhofstadt, I mean, I realize it's tough for you, but we do have to move on. So, Mr. Koenders.
Madam Prime Minister, honourable members, this was a very important but also sensitive debate. I think it was very clear from the exchanges we've heard also in the last minute. But I nevertheless think it was a very important debate. All of us, all of you, have spoken on the importance of the rule of law as a founding stone for our cooperation. Very, very few exceptions, if any. First of all, that's a positive sign. But we all realise when we talk about the rule of law, it becomes obviously very quickly not only a legal issue, but also a political issue. And that is understandable. It's an issue about sovereignty issues, about institutional balances, about political choices. And yes, the debate on the rule of law is therefore intrinsically also political, and therefore important that you discuss it here today in the Parliament. I think all of you have made clear that nobody is holy. We have to exclude double standards. We have a task in front of all of us. It's not just finger pointing, it's ensuring that all of us, in a very difficult time of the European Union, look at our own foundations for the rule of law. I speak here on behalf of the Council of Ministers. We haven't met on this yet, but I've tried to assure you also that on the side of the Council, the rule of law is key. And we have agreed on a few areas. One is the issue of the new mechanism that the Commission and the Council have established. It's an annual dialogue on the rule of law, and the Commission adopted a rule of law framework in March 2014. It's important to work now with this new mechanism, and a question was raised to me to what extent we would go in a strengthened or another mechanism. I haven't seen an approved proposal yet from the side of the European Parliament. We will have to look at it, obviously, if that comes. But I think we have a mechanism right now, and you see that it's important to start working on it with full respect and dialogue of all of us between the different institutions. In that sense, I would say that, and on behalf of the Presidency, we are committed, as you know, to assure the respect for the core values of our Union. The Commission is currently making an analysis of the facts, is in constant dialogue with the Polish government, and it plays in that sense a vital role in monitoring developments in the fields across the Union, especially in their role as guardian of the treaty. You know where the Presidency stands, you know where the Commission stands, and I think it was very important today that you had the opportunity to talk to the Polish Prime Minister, I think, who has gone also out of her way to stand before you today and answer your questions and listen to your comments. I have gathered from this, from the spirit of discussion, which sometimes is sensitive, that first of all there is a need for dialogue that everybody agrees to, a serious dialogue. Secondly, that there is, from all sides I've heard that, the need to be objective, to look at the facts in an objective way. I think it was mentioned by the Commissioner, the spirit of cooperation. And I think on that basis it was important that the Venice Commission was mentioned. And from the side of us, you may rest assured that the Presidency will follow this process closely, and you may rest assured that with all our collective efforts, with all our critical appraisals, letters, debates, articles, the rule of law in Europe will continue to foster and thrive, because ultimately only in such a vibrant society can there be a rule of law. And if one thing has become abundantly clear here in this lively debate today, politically speaking, the rule of law is colour blind. I thank you very much for the debate and look forward to the next step.
Vielen Dank. Zum Abschluss hat das Wort jetzt die Kommission, und zwar zunächst.
Now the Commission, beginning with Mr. Commissioner Oettinger, please. Thank you very much, President, Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen. In the European Union, the media takes on a special significance. The independence of the media is a common good and a great value, and diversity and pluralism in the media is again a very important commodity. And the Commission has a right. Indeed, it is incumbent on the Commission to check whether independence and pluralism in the media in Europe is endangered, or whether it's being looked after and strengthened. And that is exactly what our job description is. In the new media law, there are three bodies: the board, the supervisory board of TVP and PR, in other words, the public the broadcaster, and in the public radio broadcasting, there is the supervisory body for both of those companies, and there is a media regulator. So far, the supervisory board consists of 7 members, and there was a proposal from the Culture Minister and a proposal from the Treasury Minister. In other words, 2 from the government and 5 were, as it were, an open competition from media regulators. What is new with the change at the end of the year, it's going to be not 7 but 3 members, and all 3 can be appointed by a personal decision by the Treasury Minister. Secondly, the board. The board in future, without providing reasons and at any time, can be designated and recalled. And this also applies, and it's the Treasury Minister alone who can take those decisions. Now, under the statute of TVP and PR, without a media regulator and without any involvement of Parliament, that individual can be replaced. And the question then is whether this development, where it is not many parties, but is the government, and when these decisions affect the public broadcaster, is this a danger to the media freedom? And that's what we're currently investigating, and we are very grateful that the government has said they are prepared to enter into a dialogue. We will continue that when it comes to the major media law, which is scheduled for February or March. At that point, we will have an opportunity for a dialogue before the decision is taken. We believe that rule of law things should not be investigated retrospectively, but that there should be an active dialogue between the Commission and the government and Parliament before the big decisions are taken. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oettinger. The last speaker will be the Vice President of the Commission, Mr. Timmermans.
Mr. Minister, honourable members of the European Parliament, there are so many things to which I could react today, but given the hour I will be very brief. 3 points. The first point is, after hearing all this discussion about sovereignty, I maintain that Poland is now more sovereign, more master of its own destiny than in the 1,000 years before it became member of the European Union. By pooling its sovereignty with other European nations, for the first time in its history, Poland has borders that are no longer disputed by its neighbours.
That is true sovereignty, Madam Prime Minister. That is a true achievement of all European nations, and Poland in the first place. Secondly, all members of the European Union have signed, of their own free will, and ratified by the national parliaments European treaties, thus entering into obligations as far as maintaining the rule of law is concerned. Not just that, but even allowing the way you maintain those obligations to be judged by the court in Luxembourg, to be controlled by the Commission in Brussels, to be discussed in the European Parliament, even to be challenged by other member states of the European Union. So when there is an issue of the rule of law, there is no hiding behind national sovereignty, because you have agreed in the treaty you have signed and ratified that these issues can be discussed at the European level. So that is a fact, Mr. Legutko, who loves facts so much. Let me give you some more facts about the issue at hand. And by the way, Mr. Legutko, you are in full right of having your own opinions, but sadly not of having your own facts. Let me just raise a few issues. We have no objection, Madam Prime Minister, to the principle that the composition of the Constitutional Tribunal should be balanced. We also fully agree that the constitutional law and customs of Poland should be respected. But our concern that remains is that the Constitutional Tribunal has interpreted and applied these laws, yet these judgments are only partially being followed by you. I'm not referring to the judgment you were referring to all the time, which is the one of the 3rd of December, in which the court said the old Parliament appointed too many judges. But there's also the judgment of the 9th of December, in which the court invalidated a law of the new Parliament because it had cancelled all the previous appointments, including those that the previous Parliament had been fully entitled to make. Please, in our dialogue that we're going to continue, react to that point. And by the way, if you so cherish the opinion of the Venice Commission, and you've asked for it, I thought you did it, because I suggested it, but apparently not. Why then not wait with the implementation of the laws until the Venice Commission has time to give their opinion? Because now you just went along with it. So the Venice Commission will have to come afterwards. Well, the question remains how Poland will solve these issues. Because only by solving these issues of the composition can the tribunal again fully play its role as a rule of law safeguard. And we also expect clarifications on the other reforms which have been adopted concerning the Constitutional Tribunal. The rule of law, and especially the separation of powers, is of concern to all of us. We have learned through painful European history that we need the tripod of democracy, respect for human rights, and respect for the rule of law. Neither one can flourish without the other two. You can never use democracy as an argument against the rule of law, nor can you use democracy as an argument against the respect for human rights. We learned that through painful history, and Poland has always been the greatest victim of that painful history. And now we see a free, proud, independent Poland, not in spite of the European Union, but because of the European Union. And that is why I believe in maintaining a constructive dialogue with the Polish government, because I believe we can solve these issues in conformity with the rules that all members of the European Union have adhered to. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Meine Damen und Herren, ich muss Sie...
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I must ask you to conclude this debate. Mrs. Szydło, you have asked for the floor once and again. Well, of course you are our guest here today. You have that right, and I do not want to deny it to you, but I have to remind you that there is a new debate taking place after this one. And I would not normally allow any speakers after Mr. Timmermans. I'm assuming that your comments will be informative. It can't be further contribution to the debate, however. Otherwise, I will have to move on.
Bardzo dziękuję, panie przewodniczący, za to, że
Well, thank you very much, President, for your kindness, for giving me the word. I want to now thank you, all of you, ladies and gentlemen. This debate has been very important, both for Poland and for the European Parliament. So thank you again, and let me stress and reiterate that Poland is a democratic country, a country of rule of law, a country which respects the Constitution and all other legislation, as well as European treaties. We are, after all, a member of the European Union. Thank you very much for your statements, your questions, and I hope that the information I have provided you with will help you further develop your opinion. And to wrap up, President, if you allow, Mr. Commissioner asked me a question: why didn't we want to wait for an opinion of the Venice Commission when we adopted a law on the Constitutional Tribunal that in turn amended a previous law that was questioned by the Tribunal itself. So we didn't wait for the opinion, just as you didn't wait for the opinion. You organized this hearing, and the Commission didn't wait for the opinion of the Venice Commission. So all of us should really know and be aware that this dialogue brings us together and brings us closer to what is important to us, which is the European Union. Thank you very much.
Frau Ministerpräsidentin.
Prime Minister, thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you very much for your comments today. I'd also like to thank you for the visit that you have paid to the European Parliament. I'd personally also like to thank you as well, Prime Minister. The fact that you came here to enter into debate with us is a very good sign, and that differentiates you from many of those of you who applauded you, who felt that this debate was not appropriate. But I think that you differentiated yourself from those. Thank you very much. The session is closed.
Chiedo ai colleghi di prendere posto.
Colleagues, please take your seats.
Così possiamo proseguire nei lavori dell'Aula.
We need to get on with our work for this evening. I'd like to welcome Federica Mogherini to the room. I'd like to inform the House that there has been no request to put a vote to the correction to Article 231, paragraph 4 of the regulations, so that correction is considered to be adopted.
Riprendiamo con l'ordine del giorno.
Let's resume with today's agenda, a declaration from the Vice President of the Commission and High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy on the peace process in Colombia. I will now give the floor to Federica Mogherini, Vice President. You have the floor, Madam.
Grazie, Presidente. These are very important times for Colombia, and let me say for once, among many different difficult situations in the world around us and far away, this is a place in the world where we have signs of hope and change. And I'm very glad that you decided to organize this debate on the peace process because, again, I'm convinced this year can be the year we have good news after an armed conflict that lasted for over half a century. 220,000 people died, over 6 million have been forcibly displaced. Countless others were kidnapped, have disappeared, or have been victims of violence. The first peace negotiations, I guess this is not for Colombia, but it could be. The first peace negotiations were held more than 30 years ago, and today in Havana we finally see the chance of a breakthrough. And let me say that this opportunity of peace, of having a good news, sometimes we do have good news, as it happened a few days ago in Vienna on Iran, this opportunity for good news cannot be missed. Personally, I had followed the Colombian peace process even before becoming the Union's High Representative. I was in Bogotá already as an Italian Prime Minister. And since I started my role in the European Union institutions, I have supported, on behalf of the European Union, my friend President Juan Manuel Santos' courageous efforts. Over this year, our relationship with Bogotá has grown stronger in many different ways, from the visa waiver agreement to Colombia's engagement in our mission Atalanta. And just a few months ago, I decided to appoint Eamon Gilmore as my special envoy for the peace process, to demonstrate, to strengthen the EU's active commitment to it. And let me say that I was particularly glad that this decision was taken with the full support of President Santos. Eamon Gilmore's direct involvement in the peace process in Northern Ireland and his political experience made him a perfect, ideal candidate that, as I said, has been already in these first months very well received with all contacts he had among the parties, all of that, even in these last days. He is currently in Bogotá, and I know that he is looking forward to meet the members of the AFET committee later this month, also to explain his role, to share his views on the prospects and the remaining challenges of the peace process, and also to discuss with the members of AFET the way in which the European Union can better contribute to support this process. Let me give you an update on the state of play. We have all seen the landmark agreement that was reached